Isn't technology wonderful?
When it works.
Okay. I think we're good to go.
Sounds good to me.
All right. I will call to order the special meeting of the Park District of Highland Park on Wednesday, wrong month, December 15, 2021 at 6:01 geez, I'm really off today, Brian, at 5:01 p.m. Everything is rote, but we make mistakes. Pursuant to Section 7E of the Open Meetings Act, the President of the Board of Park Commissioners has made a finding that it is not practical or prudent to hold in-person meetings because of the COVID-19 public health emergency. Neither the elected officials nor the public will be allowed to attend regular or committee meetings in person, but will participate virtually. Links to the virtual meeting can be found on the Park District website. Roxanne, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Here.
Commissioner Kaplan, Commissioner Freeman, Vice President Grossberg,
Here.
and President Ruttenberg.
I am here, so I believe we have a quorum. We'll start on to the Brian Kaplan will catch up. Executive Director Romes, are there any additions to the agenda?
I do not have any additions to the agenda, nor does staff.
Okay. Due to tonight's site and building interviews, we are going to move the public comment section to the end of the agenda. And at that point, I have to pause. Someone should do a tap dance for a moment or two. But why don't we have the representatives introduce themselves now? Brian, would you lead the introductions, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, I will introduce Halliburton and Root, as well as their representatives from their team, which includes IMAG Corporation and Manhart Consulting. And so they've obviously been invited to this Park Board special meeting to discuss the Westridge Park site and community center building. I do want to congratulate them on being one of 2 selected firms out of 13 considered proposals for design services addressing Westridge Park site and community center building. And again, we've invited the team here to present for a time period not to exceed 20 minutes, specifically addressing the pros and cons associated with a building renovation versus a new building on the existing site or elsewhere in the park. And if selected for this project, their approach and process in working with the Park District to analyze the site, engage stakeholders, and design the building and site. So after Halliburton, Root, and team members present, the remaining time will be used for questions and answers. And then we do have a cap at 45 minutes altogether. So until we get the remaining, looks like Commissioner Freeman and Kaplan are both here. Perfect timing. So I will then, unless there's any other comments or questions from the Park Board, I would just turn it over to Halliburton Root, and it's 5:04 p.m. right now. Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
Let's record in the minutes that Commissioner Kaplan and Commissioner Freeman have joined the meeting. And so we have not just a quorum, but we have the full complement of the commissioners. And with that, we welcome the representatives, and Brian, lead the charge.
The floor is yours. Halliburton Root, go ahead.
Great. I'm Eric Reisinger, Halliburton Root, and to Brian and your team and to the Park Board and Commissioners, we really appreciate being here with you this evening. So thank you for having us. And as I kind of said, even in our kind of first interview, we've been doing all different types and hybrids and blended pieces. And so what I can say is this will be humanly awkward at times, and we'll do our best we can to get through the information. So thank you for having us. You will hear from me this evening. You will be hearing from Max Hainish, our associate and designer, from Rusty Walker, principal designer at Halliburton Root, my partner, and you'll be hearing also from our kind of consulting team during the Q&A, which will involve Jody McCarthy from Manhart Consulting, Jeff Burton from IMEG, Jeff Oak, who was not in our last interview, but also is joining us this evening as well. So thank you, everyone, for having us. So Michael Pendelski is going to steer our presentation this evening. So Brian, if you can give him control, he will go ahead and put our presentation up on the screen.
Everybody share my see my screen?
Yes.
Terrific. Thank you.
So, Mike, let's go to the next slide, please. So, essentially, we appreciate the prompts that we were given. So we've kind of reordered them just a little bit from the email that we received. And so, kind of in our order of the agenda for this evening, what we're going to do is in the next 15 minutes talk about really our approach in working, if we had the opportunity to work with the Park District. So engagement of stakeholders for both the site and building design. We will talk about our analysis process of site, of the existing location or a different location. We're going to show you relevant examples. And then we'll kind of head into the pros and cons for renovating the existing building, building new on the existing site, or building new on a different site. Mike, next slide, please. And so our expectation is as we go through this, if we need to double back on something, we can certainly do that. But essentially, our process is to really do a number of things. And in the multitude of boards that we work with, this is really a verification and validation in terms of just our approach and where we end up in the process. So it is our intent to analyze all the different site options. And there may be some sites that you have thought about that we have not discussed or maybe aware of. Make sure that we understand the overarching goals of the building, the accessibility, and just understanding that those are influenced by the site. But in our process, we look at development costs, traffic, community impact, et cetera. In fairness, we are going to be referencing your Green Plan 2024. We'll look at opportunity for future growth based upon the different sites. So all of these things matter in our analysis, and really looking at impacts both economic locally to the neighborhood that perhaps this project could be developed in or renovated in, but also look at kind of the high level zoning impact. How does that benefit? And then really just looking at all of this information and presenting it back to you. Next slide, please. So in terms of engagement, we typically break down our potential public client user groups into tiers. So tier one, as we see it, might be the park board. Tier two would then be the Park District leadership team. And again, we're making some assumptions here, but this would be filled in completely. But where we really are working with that key leadership in biweekly programming meetings, monthly, and design. In terms of the park board, it's really updating monthly, but in the initial phase, there are going to be interviews, there's going to be feedback, there's going to be a process where we certainly want to understand the goals and the collective direction that you would like to see. And again, referencing the plan that was developed by the Lakota group, that plan was from 2015. So it would be our understanding it was probably started to work on in either 2013 or 2014. Draft was delivered in 2015 and subsequently adopted. And so we want to be sensitive to past information. Maybe things have changed and maybe expectations have changed both in the last few years with the economic shifts as well as just with the kind of the lessons learned from COVID and some of the things that I think different communities and different groups are sensitive to. Tier three would be Park District project team. Tier four would be our key user groups, and then tier five is the public user groups. And all of those are really a process of mining information and getting both in-person meetings, workshops, open houses, where we're making sure that not only are we gathering the input, but we're also presenting it back so that we're building consensus and making sure that we're doing two things. One is making sure that the board's clear direction and strategic initiatives are being met. At the same time, we're satisfying what we believe our key constituents are looking for, not only in terms of the operation team and the team that's going to be living in this building, but also the people that are going to be using it. So you're basically your user groups. What's interesting about this is that in our K through 12 platform and even higher ed, but our K through 12 platform, the types of ages that are going to be using your building are very similar to a lot of the kind of recreational and athletic facilities and really district offices that we've been designing currently for our clients. Mike, next slide, please. So in the process of really diving into the analysis side, and that is of site selection, we love this district map. I think it really starts to point out all of the opportunities that the residents of Highland Park have. And so, we see Westridge sitting in really a fairly densely located community for single family homes. And so in one sense, as we look at this globally, I think from our perspective and reading through the reports, we certainly view this as a strategic location and one that is certainly an area of need. Next slide, Mike. So as we get into an example of what does a site selection analysis and process look like with Halliburton Root, what we would share with you is a case study we just completed last year for Wadsworth City Schools. And this has been a repeat client for us, ongoing. So they had identified 2 years ago a need for a new intermediate school. And their challenge was that, and the challenge at the board level was, well, where do we build this? What site do we want to identify? And how do we do this? So we met with the board in executive sessions, and we created a matrix that really started to identify each site that was presented to us by their real estate team and for analysis and review. And what you can see here on this graphic is really a kind of a graphic table that says green for ideal, yellow for manageable, kind of orange for challenging, and then if it's blank, it's still to be determined. And so we did site plan fit plans as well as analysis of budgets of each of these sites that were identified by the board. We spent time to really understand utility access, roadway access, safety of reaching these sites, because again, these are school-age children. So if they're walking here, how are they getting here? Are they walking with their families? And so this process, as we presented it back to the board, was really incredibly informative for them. And it gave them a very quick snapshot to do two things: to zero in on the site that they felt was best, that we were certainly willing to recommend, but also make sure that they had something that they could then share with the public, what their process was, how their analysis was conducted, so that they could be very fair and transparent in both identifying the final location as well as identifying the due diligence that we went through to create the analysis and the recommendation. Next slide, please. So in terms of the analysis of the site, as we lead into now the pros and cons of, do we renovate the existing building? If we're doing new, do we do it on the same site? Do we do it on the site that the current building currently occupies? Do we build it in a different location? And in fairness, we do this all the time. And this is a big piece of the puzzle. And that is this: we've got to make sure that we're verifying and validating information that the Park District for Highland Park may have already created in the past. We want to make sure that from a board level that you feel confident in whatever decision we go down. And then more importantly, the question is, well, how did we get here? Because a lot of times things happen and they seem so intuitive, but in reality, as we've had kind of the start and stop reality of what COVID has done, we want to make sure that we do that. So what we're going to do with you this evening, we're actually going to take you through kind of a very preliminary process of where we think this facility is located, and we'll give you our opinion on renovation versus new. But this is what we would typically do when we're working with the board. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we do with all of our facility assessments, and you guys have one conducted by WT Engineering, and we have reviewed that, is that we go in and this is an example of an existing facility where we're working with the state of Ohio, and we had to verify and validate a report actually that they had done in 2008 to determine whether the school would be eligible for full replacement. And in Ohio, you have to hit a particular ratio of renovation dollars compared to new. And it's a fairly extensive process. So they had an engineering report conducted. We took that engineering report, worked with the school board, and we were able to show them that by abstracting out some information that was embedded in the report. So the information that was presented to the board was just saying, here's a la carte menu, here's what you might be spending if the boiler breaks, if the elevator breaks, or if the roofing has to be redone. Well, we did something a little bit more. We took that report and we actually pulled it out, and we gave kind of this, the X disagree, green agree, and blue kind of this new item. And what we were saying was, we went back in and we really upgraded and updated all of their numbers to say, well, your heating system went from a rating of 2 to a rating of 3, does need to be replaced. And so we walked them through a very extensive process of determining whether they should renovate their existing facility or go to new. Next slide, please. So in that report, and very similar to what you see in your WT engineering report, you even get as specific as some of the areas of discussion over roof and areas of water infiltration, et cetera. And so we're able to go in and do a fairly extensive kind of grading of that report just to make sure that the board is updated and is aware of the potential risk that they have. What we identified for this particular project is that they were sitting on potential of $11 million in catastrophic repair. So what I mean by that is, if something had happened to the building, weather related or otherwise, they might be looking at an $11 million price tag that they had not been budgeting for in their capital improvements, nor could they. And so it was something that really was an eye opener for the board. And certainly as the state of Ohio is willing to partner with them and give them money, they looked at that as a reason to start to look at a new facility versus renovating. Next slide, please. So let's talk about West Ridge. So the West Ridge Center, what we did was we went in and we wanted to make sure that we're using information that you already previously commissioned and abstracted out. So on the left-hand side, you see the summary description of a recommendation to decommission the West Ridge Center. So certainly one that's not looking for it to be renovated, not looking for it to really look for investments in it, but one that where the Lakota group was saying, we think that this building, due to the inadequacy of storage and some of the spatial relationships, the programs that are in it, poor infrastructure, they back in 2019, I think in the final recommendation, is looking for that to occur in terms of saying it's time to consider a new building. On the right-hand side, the key takeaways related to the Park District facilities, and we find this to be very important, is we're trying to say, okay, if on the left we have an opinion of what the facility can and can't do, then on the right, what is this building trying to do, or what are the expectations that the Park District has? And so in the key takeaways that came out of your focus groups and your open houses and some of your data gathering that was conducted, was that saying that the recreation facilities really need to be upgraded, and they're not meeting kind of a standard of peer community facilities. At the same time, looking at centralization of some recreation facilities could benefit the operations and maintenance efficiency. And really it kind of sets a benchmark goal. So making sure that the facility is a reflection of the community, that the community feels that they're being made a priority. And then looking at the existing facility in terms of wayfinding, signage, et cetera. Does it lack cohesiveness? Does it bring it together? And then just really looking at operating costs. So what we know is that based upon the report that we reviewed, your existing facility is lacking adequate insulation, both in the roof area and possibly even in the walls. We know that the facility has multiple heating apparatuses that are used to heat and cool that building. We know that there are some issues with overall stormwater management. And so all of those things we have to say then in our evaluation, okay, well, then is the renovation going to help us or is it going to hurt us? Is there an advantage to it? And I want to be very clear here. Holliburton Root, a 140-year-old architectural firm, we're really good at renovating buildings. And a lot of times we're renovating a lot of the buildings that the firm once created in the late 1800s and early 1900s. But I think what we're going to see is why that this building further challenges that. And so here's what I think is very important because of our expertise in both civic projects as well as school projects. This building was originally designed to be a school. The building is asking to be flexible and now accommodate both operational functions of the Park District as well as the arts and dance, et cetera, that is being requested. And we just don't feel that this existing building and the footprint and the limitation that it brings is offering much value to renovate it. We think it could be very expensive. So we're going to go to the next slide, please. So what I'm going to just highlight here is that the question on the table, as we saw from the prompts, and we thought they were very thorough and we really appreciated them, is that, okay, we have a question on the table. Do we renovate and do we do an addition? Is that an opportunity? And based upon the data and the reports that we have read thus far, and again, not being hired by the group, we're not sure that that's really a viable option. Then the other piece becomes rebuild on the existing site, or do you build on the newer open area, or maybe in a different location if that's even on the table? And what are the advantages to that? And how do we see that coming forward? And so what we would say is that we know from experience that whenever our clients can keep their existing building operational while a new facility is being built on the site where the site can be improved, flipped, changed, made safer, it's better for the client. What we know is that the existing building, site limitations for parking, safety to get back to the nursery school, the easement access, really the volume of parking that is actually in a very small area. There are a lot of safety concerns that the existing Westridge facility poses to the team. So even if we were to renovate that building, we're still left with some of those very big challenges of safety, security, et cetera. And then at the same time, that building footprint, working on that, we really would recommend that we would have to gut the entire facility, roof included, reframe, get non-combustible materials in there, and really work towards a safer structure. So if we look at item 2, rebuild on existing site, certainly that's a possibility. Then what happens is that building has to come down. We have to relocate and look for swing space, which could be expensive. And essentially, we start to displace a lot of the functional activity, and then still gaining safe access back for the school, the nursery school that's there, is something that's going to have to be maintained on a continuous basis in either scheme of rebuild on existing site or new open area. But then when we look at that kind of new open area, what we start to see is an opportunity, we think, to elevate the community, to continue elevation of the Park District buildings that you guys are implementing. And I'd like to kind of turn it over to Max and just show you what we think really represents, we think, that the kind of the master plan of 2024 and directionally what we think is a transformative project that starts to elevate expectations that I think Highland Park District holds for itself. Max, can I turn it over to you and we'll narrate just a quick little video.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Eric. And then we're going to give Mike a chance to pull this up. So as Eric was ending on the new master plan approach that we proposed in our initial proposal to the Park District, we just kind of wanted to capture in its entirety what it's accomplishing with the kind of holistic approach that was asked for in its possible new layout, or this kind of charrette or vignette of what could be. And so as we come along the south side of the park, what we wanted to be able to showcase, and the video, I apologize, is going to be a little choppy just based on, I think, the meeting platform, is an entirety of a building that sets the stage along the street front of the neighborhood. An elongated building, a low building that has the opportunity to serve as that kind of community porch element. We'll see a couple times how that building starts to open up to the street and to the pedestrian network. When we were on the site, one of the amazing things about this site is those existing pedestrian networks that kind of snake you through the sites and along the tree lines. And so what this building really seeks to do is find a way to strategically place itself amongst those pedestrian networks and find a way to have extensions of the building kind of bolster those experiences. So as we come into what could be a front approach to the building from Ridge, we'll take kind of a slow pan along here and see the north possible rec entry to the building. We see the dance studios and the art programs up on the second floor, and that kind of key administration space along the first floor. And, as Eric was talking to, one of, the integrated program approaches to this building, very similar to the multiple users that access a school building. We'll see here that kind of breezeway open area of the building that allows us to have a natural break in space and have a dedicated front door, a dedicated entry, dedicated building services to the early childhood center, making sure that we have the strongest supervision and safety and the ability for this to operate kind of as its own entity. And then as we move to the north side of the building, we can see into the gymnastics gymnasium that's positioned on the west side of the building, closest to the rest of the outdoor athletic programs, offering some possible flexibility between the gymnasium and the outdoors. And then finally, that main entry again that we're back at, that takes the covered walkway of the pedestrian network and starts to wrap that covered walkway up to become part of the integral architectures of this new rec center and community center. And then finally, as we pull back, we can start to see on the second floor inside that dance studio space that really has that opportunity to be kind of that beacon for the park district. And I think, you know, all of the things that we've been talking about, again, whether renovation or addition or building new, there's a series of just these really good planning principles that Halliburton Root knows like the back of our hand, making sure that new interventions are based in a pride of place, have that supervision and safety thought through for approaches to the building and parking and access, making sure that these new facilities cover all things wayfinding and landmarking with the multiple user groups on the site, are looking for every opportunity for instituting sustainable measures, whether that's in the formal building or if it's on site approach and stormwater management, and using those really as a teaching tool. And then finally, the operations and maintenance, as Eric was starting to hit on, and those considerations, whether a new facility or an existing facility, you know, making sure that we are bringing to the team all of the possible mechanisms to make sure that new operations and maintenance are going to be simple and efficient for the district.
Thank you, Max. And I think that, you know, what we were trying to do is outline for everyone here our process of working with you, the verification and validation of data, looking at the real dollars, looking at a comparison and benchmarking of energy modeling of new versus existing. And so this would be the process that we would work through. So thank you very much, Brian. I know we've hit the 20-minute mark, so we're going to turn it back to you and to the board. And thank you for letting us this brief presentation.
Thank you. President Ruttenberg.
Well, that was great. Thank you very much. And at this point, we'll let the commissioners ask questions. And I think we'll start with Terry.
I would say that I'm kind of in awe a little bit. I taught a fine arts class and I taught about Halliburton Root. So you should be proud that you work for such a historic firm. I didn't know you did these smaller type projects. I think of the Marquette Building and the Board of Trade, and I think of those sort of things. So it's just awesome to be sort of in your company. So like,
oh, you're too kind. Thank you. Thank
no,
you.
It's really impressive. I have to say that I've probably taken, I humbly say that I've probably taken the least amount of time looking at it. I'm a teacher and it's a really, really busy time for me here at this time of the year. So I just want to say that I learned a lot looking at that video. I don't know what you call that 3D sort of look at it. And I would appreciate it. Is there a way to just go back to that and kind of freeze it at certain moments so that I can really capture it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So from what I understand is that a great deal of that building will be in where our large parking lot is right now, or at least fronting Ridge.
It will be west of it. We preserve the parking lot.
Oh, so that is the same parking lot. Okay.
That's the same parking lot, right? That was one of our sort of cost saving decisions as well as operational.
I see. So it's slightly west of it.
Mhm.
Okay. So as we rotate through this, so now we're looking north and we're kind of swinging. Yeah, you can probably go quickly. It's more when you were showing the intimate details of the building itself. So Okay, so now we're looking straight west here, right?
Yeah.
And then freeze it for just a second. Okay, all right, so yeah, so good. So which way am I looking right now?
Due west.
Okay, so this is west. I'm standing in the large parking lot, right?
Yeah, more or less on the sidewalk.
Yeah, got it.
Well, that would
Okay.
be the new parking lot, right, Max?
It is the new parking lots.
Yeah.
And
So we put a parking lot to the north.
And the separation of those parking lots was really an athletics-based parking lot on the north that would have access to the rec center and the outdoor fields, and then using, as Rusty was saying, that existing parking lot to really serve as the community center entry, and then implementing a drop loop in that for the early childhood center to have very two clear and distinct arrivals to the building.
Yeah, they have, not only will they have different schedules and uses, they have different people and activities, and
Absolutely.
they have to be separated. It's sort of, as Max said, it's part of one of our principles and how we approach it.
Yeah, right, exactly. The less connection there is between the general public and an early childhood area, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's why they're about as far apart from each other as they can be.
Okay, can you keep going?
So what you're seeing is the artist loft on the top. So the dance studio and the art studios sort of sit above as a loft. The
Right.
administration and conferencing is below.
And
But you can
Rusty,
also see this
outdoor-
concept of
outdoor
a
classroom.
Yeah.
of a porch. The
Okay,
whole building is united by this sort of low sweeping porch.
okay,
or
stop
arcade.
right here. So now am I looking west?
Still,
Yes?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we have the administration, some of the folks that are on this Zoom right now. This would be where they would be housed. Got it. Okay, keep going.
and we did that so that the administration is sort of a passive supervisor for the early education. They're not actively, but they're able to survey and control the site from there.
Right, so now we're in the old parking lot.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, okay, now I've got a better sense of it. Okay, keep wrapping around. So now we're still looking west. And then it's gonna loop around. Okay, now we're looking north again. Is that what?
South.
Okay, stop it for a second. Can I just get okay. Oh, I see. So now we're on the other side of the building. We're on the north side of the building looking south.
Exactly.
Okay, this is where I lost you. Okay, keep going.
Animations can be a little disorienting.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a parking lot now that allows access to this north entrance. Okay.
Right. That's sort of the recreation athletics parking lot that's going to have to accommodate big events, small events, daily uses. So it's sort of
Got it.
separated
Okay.
for that purpose.
Okay, so unequivocally, you are recommending that we take this down, okay, and build new in this new thing. Okay.
We are.
Okay, that's
And I think it's important, though, that just add to that is that when we designed this during the design sort of charrette or design competition, we built a cost model. So we're recommending something to you that we believe you can afford based on your budget, and that is something that we do because we're principally just school designers. School districts, I'm sure you know this, they do everything they can with paperclip and bubble gum, right? And that's what we do. But we make it beautiful, we make it operational, we make it maintainable. But we are very good at figuring out how to get a great building and a rich program out of a modest budget. And we don't do anything, we don't show you anything or promise anything to you unless we know we can deliver it. And in the sense of that the cost is realistic.
okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to President Ruttenberg. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Jen?
Hi, I appreciated that a lot. And thank you, Rusty, for discussing the meeting the budget piece of it, because that's incredibly appreciated. One quick question I had was, we do sort of, abut the property to something in the school district or over there on the back piece of the property. is there any reason we couldn't shift this building around to other aspects of the property to get more out of the sports, angle out of it or whatever, sort of like why the piece that you picked versus, my thought was sort of getting closer to the 112 property because we have a half-day program and they have a half-day program, that kind of thing. But I am interested in your thoughts on like placement on the property as a whole.
Yeah,
Well,
so Rusty, let me go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Then over to the design team.
Eric's worried because I had my booster yesterday and I'm a little loopy.
I did too. My arm is killing me.
Oh, I'm dying, just so you know.
Brian, a little bit of that behind the scenes information. So Jen, here's what's interesting about your question. I love the question. So there are two things that factored into our decision. One is we felt compelled that we needed to salvage the existing east parking lot on that site because we need to save money. And so what we
As well as
didn't want to do is to have to go down back through stormwater management, redoing infrastructure that we could fully take advantage. So just so you know, when and growing up in the North Shore and this whole area and going by the site all the time, when we were initially looking at it, if we didn't make it clear, kind of I represent really help the program management. The design team is the design team. And so, I really did push them to try to salvage as much of the infrastructure as we could. And then secondly, knowing when school gets out, just what a nightmare it is traffic wise, what we didn't want to do is push more traffic, automobile traffic closer to the school. So we're trying to keep that further away. So that's what led to that decision. It's not to say that may be the best decision, but those were the compelling reasons why we did that.
Yeah, the other thing is, Max and I probably rotated the plan 180 degrees a bunch of times. Would the early ed be to the north with more adjacency to the current program on site? And we put all recreation to the south. That would be a worthwhile investigation based on your comment. But also, as we walked the site, we discovered there's a stormwater basin all the way back on the west side. And we just didn't want to get into that. And then just being stewards of your money and knowing how you have to be stewards of your community's money. Why build a whole new parking lot when you got one that would really work for our design? So
Yeah.
that was the other reason.
Okay, thank you.
But I
Otherwise,
think you can get that adjacency if we looked at 180, it could work.
Yeah, I have no more questions. That was my big one.
Thank you,
Thank
Jen.
you.
Calvin?
Thanks, President Runberg. Let me begin again. I appreciate the comprehensive presentation. I do have a couple questions. Number one, what's your theory of approach? Obviously, this is creating a commercial, we're going to call it a commercial building within a residential zoning district. So how would you envision dealing with residential homeowners to the north and to the south as you decide to relocate the footprints of the building?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So it's very similar to what we would do when we do our schools in these communities. And I think, from our perspective, it's two things. One, letting them know that we haven't changed the function of the building that's already here. So right now, this already exists in the neighborhood. Secondly, from our perspective, we really do have to continue to build consensus with our community. We are going to have community meetings where we can start to roll this out. We're going to roll out in two ways. We're going to roll out a process and just talk about site analysis, et cetera. We don't want to show the full thing, and then kind of work towards identifying the opportunities and importance to actually further push this building into the site, get it kind of off the immediate edge, and really give a nice buffer between kind of those residential components and the building. But it'll run similar to how we do our K through 12 buildings.
Okay.
Often what we hear is, is it going to create a lot of shade? Going to create a lot of traffic? Is it going to be, offensive or not congruent with the communities or the neighborhood's architecture? And we work very hard to make a piece of civic architecture that the community can be very proud of, but also to be sure that it's sensitive and compatible with the architectures of the community. And that's why this thing is a one-story, very low slung. It's a porch, so we're even talking about sort of house architecture or residential architecture. And then the other thing is to be very effective in promoting and marketing the amenity to the community so that they understand that maybe they might be against the building, and we'll work on that. But it's going to be really hard to be against the program because the program is for the kids, and you want the community to get behind. Wait, I'm going to take something away from the kids? No, you can't do that. So we're promoting this for the kids and the betterment of the community, and then the building comes after. And so can be a very effective way to communicate that.
And I appreciate how the fact that, creating that porch-like setting around helps mitigate the bulk and
Yep.
the structure and provide some relief and some nuance to the building as it relates to the neighborhood. So I can see what you try to do there.
That was the intent. I'm glad
Listen,
you picked up on it.
Then I got it. Okay. I got it. There's always a
Great.
first for everything for me to understand something. So I think I picked up on that. That actually kind of leads me to my next question. Obviously, we want to create a piece of architecture that we could be proud of. And I know you've done a lot of schoolwork. How do you balance the competing interests of trying to create something visually pleasing with the other competing balance of trying not to appear like you've spent too much money?
Eric, if you want to jump in, but I'll just qualify that with that is.
Well, hold on, Rusty. You're the designer. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this too.
And then he'll just ridicule me afterwards. But you're stewards of public money, just like almost all of our projects. I don't know if I said it earlier in the first meeting, but almost everything we do, it betters the world from an educational or recreational or even 501c3 philanthropic. All of our work is sort of curated that way. So that is a conversation that is constant for us. And if you said like, what's your design theory or design basis, we would say we're programmatic. Program is first. So let's get the best spaces for the use that we want, that enhances the community's connection to the park district. It creates generations of positiveness. Again, it's for the kids, it's for the community. And then because we've done so many schools, we have a way of working, as Max talked about, the principles. So daylight, circulation, land, wayfinding, landmarking, the appropriate scale, and then responding sometimes to the immediate context of the scale of the houses, of some of the materiality of the civic community or civic buildings in the community, which you have some lovely ones. So there's a whole essay, a whole analysis, a whole way that will work to make sure that program came first, but you have a building that you're very proud of, and you have a building that really fits in naturally to the community. And it today it will look like it's been there for maybe a little while, and 100 years from now, they can't imagine that it wasn't there.
And Rusty, I think the other thing though, and this is the question we get all the time about the building, making sure that it doesn't look too expensive and reflects the neighborhood. I do think that the master plan and really the direction the park board has set is trying to elevate the community. And so this design is intentionally bringing in kind of the wood warm tones. We're trying to really respond to energy and sustainability. And I think that if we can demonstrate that this building is appropriately designed, not over-designed, not spending too much money on things that we don't need to spend money on, but still giving a very positive experience for the next 50 to 75 years. I think, Cal, that's one of the challenges that we always have, and one that we'll work on and kind of really try to, we also do a lot of work with not-for-profits. We kind of talk about that mentality of, well, am I allowed to have something that looks nice? And I think part of what we want to do is start to elevate the architectural response that the park district is going to bring to this community.
Okay, thank you.
It has to be something the community is proud of, and certainly it doesn't open criticism as if we were irresponsible with funds. And that's where our communication of the Enrich program really.
I mean, everyone wants to be this beautiful, but they don't want to seem like they spent a lot of money making it beautiful. I get it.
Of course.
Okay. My next question was regarding sustainability, but I think I'm gonna punt and let our president Ruttenberg ask that question because I assume that's on his list of things that he wanted to talk about. So I'll skip.
No, I prefer we address it now. Let's do it.
Okay. Oh, fine. Can you address what your vision is for sustainability for the property and the building, and for example, is it a green building or what do you envision making it so again we can promote that aspect of the building to the community also.
Yeah. So Cal, we expect this building to meet, at a minimum kind of LEED silver. Certainly we would love to set our sights even higher if we could. But when we're talking about LEED and sustainability, I just want to make sure we're pointing out one thing that's very important. We want this building to operationally run far more efficiently and less costly than you currently have. And so just from an energy perspective, what we would love to see is that while the building footprint might be growing, we'd love to see the operational costs come down. So lead energy efficient, daylighting, et cetera, but also at the same time, setting very appropriate sustainable goals. So both with Manhart Consulting and with IMEG, what we will talk about, obviously, stormwater management, all of the things that need to check the appropriate boxes, but not just to do it because it's functional for you and you're in the pocketbook for an operational perspective. So one of the things that we had asked Jeff Oak at IMEG to look at with us is even the possibility of going with a wood structure for the entire facility. And I don't mean the simple 2x4 structure that's not fire rated, but really looking at going with a very sustainable infrastructure skeleton for this building, which is what we see as a not just a growing trend, but a really an area that is important. Jeff Oak, do you want to just speak to that briefly about looking at it going to that wood structure? I know you and Rusty had talked about it earlier.
Sure, yeah, no problem, thanks. So yeah, our team, we really believe in data-driven decisions. And so what we would like to do is come to you with some options, to evaluate building the structure out of traditional concrete and steel versus building the structure out of mass timber as an option. And what does that do to the carbon footprint of the facility? And is there a cost impact? Is there a maintenance implication to that? Whatever it may be. And so, our analysis will give you the data to understand the first cost implications, the maintenance implications, the long-term life of the building implications, and give us the data to make a very educated decision as a team as to what's the right decision for the Park District. We'll do that both for the structure of the building, the envelope of the building, the different materials that we select, as well as the mechanical system and the lighting system and all those different aspects of the project. We can evaluate many different options to figure out what's the right system for you in the Park District.
Do you ever use solar or wind technology and incorporate those into your buildings?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just completed a project in Mount Prospect. It's an early childhood center that they had a goal of pursuing net zero. And they wanted to pursue a grant through the Illinois Clean Energy. And as part of the project, if we were able to achieve net zero on the project and have it certified as net zero, they were going to achieve a $2 million grant to help fund some of the additional sustainable features. One of those features was renewable energy of solar on the roof that would make up for the energy usage of the building. So we performed a lot of energy modeling to determine what was the most efficient system, HVAC system to install. We really improved the envelope, the performance of the envelope overall, and then we made up for the losses through the renewable solar energy on the project. And it's really been exciting. The school district's really proud of it. And we've gone around speaking to it at various conferences, and we're in the first year of operation, and so far so good.
So I want to just add on to the mass timber conversation, because I don't want to leave it with the impression that this is sort of a stick-built 2x4 building, but this is a engineered mass timber system that performs as steel or concrete would. But what we love about it is that you can expose it in the building. So you could have this really lovely, warm, sort of demonstrative expression of the structure of the building. We get to start thinking about the building as a learning tool, all those things. And we don't have to necessarily spend money on sheetrock and all the other things to cover up this beautiful wood. And it is flame rated or fire rated. We would have to look into your local municipality, but I think it would be allowed. The other thing that's going on with this sustainability, we're dealing with the animal shelter right now, is there is an ambition of today, but there's an ambition of 5 to 10 years, and they want to be carbon neutral. So we're looking at put solar cells and all those things, but they don't have exact amount of money today. So we're designing it so they can come back and put those things on without undoing or having to add all new infrastructures, but we're really bringing it up to the point where they can just connect it. And the other thing that we're all going to start learning about with sustainability is electric building. I know it sounds crazy because, in the 70s, electric heating was a disaster, right? But what they're really looking at is using no gas burning no gas to operate the building. And that's quite ambitious, but there may be a possibility to design a building now that can be converted later for that. So that's a lot of the things that we're looking. But look, if we can get your operation costs down, you get to invest money in your programs and your kids. That's the key. So the less money you're spending to operate the building, the more money you're spending on offering great programs.
Okay, Barney, I have a couple more questions, but if you have a follow-up, we just probably get time to take it. You're muted, Barney.
Yeah, not anymore. My question is then, the budget that you've been using, does it or does it not include putting on solar systems so that we start with day one knowing that we're going to have a solar roof? I mean, you've got a total flat roof in this project.
Yeah. So I would say right now, that's an analysis we still need to go through. I'm not saying it can't happen. We need to go deeper into those details, and similar to the data that IMEG would create with us, with Halliburton, we would then come back to you and say, okay, here's what we think our options are to incorporate some of those sustainability goals with solar, and solar certainly on the reheat of water, et cetera. So I think, right now it's, we don't have enough information to know all in all if that budget can contain that or not.
But my partner's being a little modest here, is that we will be your partner and your champion in finding ways to get these things on the building. It becomes your priority. He'll find partners. We can find grants. We'll work with IMEG to see where there's other programs or things that we can funnel towards you that maybe don't directly affect the immediate budget, but they're things that that can augment or we can find people willing to contribute to the project.
Okay, thank you.
I
Cal?
have two more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
With regard to your concept regarding separate buildings, in your experience, does that increase the operating costs of the building by having separate structures, basically?
So we don't think it's going to increase the operating costs. What we think it's going to do is, based upon what we just experienced with COVID and having had children in daycare, et cetera, is that we actually think this is going to be very important. This having and we kind of view it as still all under one roof type of building. We would have multiple air handler units, multiple packages anyway for mechanicals. All we're doing is saying we're going to isolate one specifically for the daycare and childcare, and essentially, we don't think it's going to be adding additional costs, but we think from a operational point of view, it's going to be better, because as we have talked internally, and as we've talked with a lot of our clients with young children, is that what we're trying to get everybody to understand is, look, COVID's going to be the new normal that we're all going to be living with. So let's just make sure that we do the best we can so that an entire facility doesn't have to be shut down due to an infection or a case or et cetera. And so we think that this building and the efficiency that we can bring in there, I don't think we're going to see additional operational costs for that.
Okay.
So the key is,
we're at a time constraint, so I'm going to skip to my last question. One of the other things about this is that this West Ridge is not just a building, but it's also a park. And we've talked about the parking lot, we talked about the building. Can you talk a little bit about the park and, for example, pedestrian access, or what you envision, how that's going to be integrated into the neighborhood? And I promise that's my last question.
Yeah, and Cal, can we go back to the animation? We just want to show you something that I think is pretty impressive. And the park was absolutely part of our design. Mike Pendelski, can you call that up? And I think that, and if you can go to the aerial, would be very important. Yeah, at the beginning, just swing around just a little bit. Hold right here. So two things are occurring. We have the event lawn, Mike, if you can circulate on the event lawn. So we have the event lawn, which is critical. Mike, you just need to put the cursor on it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have the event lawn. So right now, we've already anticipated a controlled outdoor environment that could be programmed by the park district, which could be amazing. We have the playground, we have the event lawn, which we are putting in almost every one of our projects. At the same time, that kind of west covered area, what we love about that is, because we all have been outside when it's snowing and we're watching baseball, now you could be under the roof. In the summertime, when it's really hot, the sun was amazing this past year, you can be in shade watching the baseball games. Mike, now just let the animation play, Mike. what has been really impressive for us is acknowledging that. So Rusty, do you want to add anything into that?
Well, you have a beautiful park. And what we wanted to do was preserve all the things we thought that were beautiful and successful about it. And we, we all went for a walk around the paths, and they're amazing. And that's they were one of the informing components of the site for our building concept, is that our building would organize and connect all those pathways and those experiences, as well as preserve the beautiful little park. I don't know, Max might know the name of it. I can't remember the name. But that's a special little space, that park over on the west side. So we're master planners and campus designers as well. So we took an integrated approach to how this whole site will interact, the fields, the buildings, the parking, the circulation. And then, we know that you have a lot of people that come and walk that loop. And we want to get them walking that loop, but also interacting with the games, but also interacting with our building and understanding this is all here for them and as a resource for the community, and we're promoting as many good interactions as we can on the site.
I'm gonna, please don't think I'm interrupting you, even if I am. Cal, unless you have another question.
No, I'm done.
All right.
Thank you very much. By the way, when I'm looking this way, my screen's this way. That's why I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
I am looking at you. I want you to know.
Okay. So
Thank you.
You just took 15 seconds off Brian's time. So
Okay.
Brian Kaplan.
Yes, I just got to unmute myself. I've got, most of it's been answered. What percent will the green space at West Ridge change with your plan compared to what it has now?
I don't know if I can tell you the percentage, but Max, why don't you just pull up the site plan and we'll just show you where we repositioned it.
Mike, can you pull up the site plan in the appendix?
Next, you're looking for the existing site plan?
No, the new one.
It's just a couple down from that.
There you go.
This one right here?
Yeah, there you go. So I think, the interesting thing about the site plan layout is that we've really kind of swapped building footprint locations. And so where the old building was, the diamond field and additional lawn gets implemented. So I think, and then the event lawn, it may be equal. The one thing that makes me hesitate just a little bit is we are showing an expanded athletics parking, where the first number one on the top side of the site plan is showing, to accommodate the multitude of new users that we are expecting to come to the site. But I think that, all of that needs to be balanced.
Yeah, we're
with
not,
further
it's
study.
a guess. Yeah. Sorry, Max, go ahead.
No, I think that's really the summary, Rusty, is there is a small increase in parking on the site. And so I think that is probably saying a little bit of green space is converted to pavement, but I don't think that this is necessarily the final solution without additional data.
Right, and through the new field designs, we have the proper orientation for the fields now, which we feel good about, as well as the opportunity to, rethink the watershed and the water management site through that. But these tree pathways and the park and all that, we worked to make sure all that is preserved because we think it's unique and beautiful for the park.
Brian, do you have any? It's back to you.
Will there be any, if I'm driving down, can you put that back up, please?
Absolutely.
So if I'm driving down Ridge, I won't see the green fields anymore, it looks like.
No, you would see the diamond field on the north side, for sure.
Okay. And then my last question that has been covered is, and you can get this to us later. It doesn't matter. I'm good. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to ask, what's the
Very nice presentation, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. What's the square footage of the new building compared to our existing building?
The program that was asked for, I think we were coming in around 37,000, 38,000 gross square feet. And then we do have the plan that Amalia passed on for the existing facility. But I'm struggling to come up with the square footage of the existing facility.
Hey, Mike, can you just go to the bed sheets that we have, please?
Sure.
They're in the appendix of this presentation.
Well, let me ask it a different way. Is this materially bigger than what we
No.
have?
No, what we did was, well, hold on. We took the recommended program that we received. We then integrated that program. Mike, can you give Max control and he can just go to it?
Oh, no, it's just okay.
Yeah,
this is good. This is good.
But essentially, we're looking at kind of a 44,000 square foot building here that we think works more efficiently with what you need. I don't know the exact square footage of the existing facility.
Okay. Well, that's fine. But let me ask: are you programming it to have a basketball gym, or just a dance studio and a gymnastics facility?
Currently, as the program requested, we have a gymnastics gym sized in there. Now, could you raise the height of it potentially and have the versatility? But because of the equipment that the gymnastics requires and the specialized flooring and the like, to be able to switch that building around might be a little challenging. But if that is a program addition that you want to study through the design phase, certainly we would look at that with you, see how we could accommodate it.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, and I know there's some ladies who we didn't hear from. I want to thank you for your presentation. I don't have any other questions. I think it's a really great concept that you're presenting to us, and we appreciate the time and the explanations. I hope you didn't think our questions were too baseline.
No, they were great. They kept us honest.
Well, that's the job that we all have.
Right.
All right, thank you. We really appreciate the time and consideration.
And we appreciate the forum. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll get ready for our next group. So have a nice evening.
Brian, we'll send the animation and the presentation we just gave to Amalia.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you
right.
all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mr. Romes, do we jump right into the next presentation?
Yeah, I assume that there'll be, I think they were stalling a little bit to log in. And so it looks like the Woodhouse Tanucci team is actually now with us. So I want to welcome them to the special meeting of the Park Board of Commissioners. President Ruttenberg, I can keep going if you like, and unless you need a break for anything or anybody on the board does.
I am prepared to move forward rapidly.
Okay, fantastic. So again,
Can I have 1 minute to go grab a drink?
Sure, I will just introduce the team if that's okay, and then we'll have them wait till you get back to keep going, if that's okay. Okay. So again, welcome. And of course, congratulations for being selected as one of the 2 firms out of the 13 total that were considered and did submit proposals for design services addressing the Westridge Park site and community center building. And this evening, as you know, the Park Board has invited Woodhouse Tanucci and team members from, I know, Gaywalt Hamilton, I believe Don Matthews is here, and I believe that's it. But we have approximately 20 minutes that we've scheduled for a presentation from your team, specifically addressing the pros and cons associated with a building renovation versus a new building on the existing site or elsewhere in the park. And then if selected for this project, the process and approach that you would take in working with the Park District, the board, and the community, and engaging the stakeholders in the design of the site and the building. So after the 20 minutes of the presentation, the remaining time will be used for questions and answers from the park board. And we have scheduled about 45 to 50 minutes in total. So again, we'll wait for Commissioner Kaplan to return, and then we will turn it over to Andy Tanucci and the team. So we'll just.
Okay, Brian is here.
It looks like maybe Cal isn't.
There's Commissioner Bernstein. Okay, so with that, it's about 6:06, and we will turn it over to the team. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Brian. I'm gonna share my screen here. Thanks everybody for having us today. Back again to talk a little bit more here about Westridge. You can all see this, correct? Perfect. As you mentioned, Brian, we're here today. Andy Tanucci here, joined by Brian Foote and Heather LaHood, as well as Don Matthews from Gewalt Hamilton. Same team that presented to you at our first interview, so thought it would be nice to bring back the same group as a follow-up. We'll keep this initial presentation brief so that we can spend most of the time in the question and answers. What we really wanted to say is that we think architecture is a service. We really feel like we distinguish ourselves based on the quality of that service that we provide, the level of care that we provide in our work, and our thoughtfulness. Really, a lot of that care that we bring is a care about your mission. I think we feel that that's evident in all of our work that we've done for the public institutions over the last 30 years. I know that there's a question, I think, on the table right now by the board as to whether or not you should be defining what this project is for us. Is this project a renovation project, or is this project new construction? And I don't think it's critical right now for you to be defining that for us. I think that it leads to much better outcomes, as evidenced by Rosewood, when we don't define the outcome before we start, and we let the process develop, and we let the product develop through that process, through that collaboration with you. Our mission over the last 30 years has been to work for agencies that serve the public, agencies just like yours. And we work on both new construction projects and we work on renovation projects alike. And it's 50-50 in our business. Each have benefits and each have constraints. So whether you're working on new construction or renovation, they come with pros and cons. So we want to spend a bit today talking about pros and cons, and we can circle back to any of these slides in the Q&A. But with each of these projects demonstrated here, it wasn't a fait accompli when we started the project as to whether or not it was going to be a renovation or a new construction. So we went through a process with our clients over a short period of time or over a long period of time to determine what the final outcome would be. Just to jump right into it and to get more specific, if we just had to list the pros and cons of new construction versus renovation, some of the pros of new construction is that you can design a facility that is perfectly functional for what you're trying to do. So when you think about gymnastics, designing a facility that's exactly the right size, by exactly the right height, with all the right mechanics for the uses that you're trying to achieve. New construction is often an easier kind of construction because you just start from scratch. So you have cost confidence and you have schedule confidence. You generally know what you're going to find with new construction, more so than with renovation when you start digging into an old building. Also, we should consider life cycle costs and maintenance costs. When you start with new construction, you're going to reduce your long-term maintenance costs and your long-term life cycle costs because you'll have the latest systems, you'll have the most energy efficient building possible. Interestingly, and you'll see across the bottom, the same for each of these pros and cons of new and renovation, is that optics are often a pro and a con of any kind of project. So with new construction, one of the pros is its optics. You spend a lot of money for your constituents and you give them something brand new. The cons, there's a lot of waste with new construction. You're going to tear down an old facility that has a lot of embedded energy in it that has been used very lovingly over the years. So there's more waste with new construction. All the character of a historic building is lost with new construction, and a lot of times the stories that were told in those buildings are lost as well. Sometimes new construction can be more expensive just because you start taking up more of the site. When we rebuild a building in a new location with a new parking lot, and that means new field work, that typically would mean a greater impact. So it could lead to more costs. And of course, that's part of the optics too, is that new construction often has higher site impact. And when we say this, we're thinking about the neighbors of the project at Westridge. A new construction project will inevitably be a little bit more invasive than a renovation project would be. Something to consider always when we're dealing with publics. On the renovation side, pros is that we save resources and we reduce waste. We've got an existing facility. Can we reuse it? More than likely, yes. And so in so doing, we save those resources. There's a lower site impact because we have a smaller footprint. We stay on the existing footprint. Oftentimes, and one of the considerations we understand with Westridge is that there's existing functions that take place in the facility currently. And if we were to build new on that same site, we'd have to contemplate where those programs would go. So we could build new on other parts of the site. Potentially building to the west side of the site might be interesting. And that would leave the existing facility in place. But if we renovate, we can also phase that construction so that you can leave people in the building and we could renovate portions of the building and move the programs around inside of the building. We've done that before on certain projects. And obviously then if we reuse a building, there's those optics. It's great to reuse the building. You've saved a facility, you've saved those resources, and we can project that to your community. On the con side of renovation, there can be programmatic compromise with renovation projects. So not every program fits exactly into the existing footprint that you have in the building. Sometimes the building would give you too much square footage. So the building in a renovation project might need to be a little bit bigger than if it was a new project. Increased maintenance costs often come with renovation projects because you're going to keep, you would potentially keep this historic brick building. So that masonry needs to be renovated over time. And the systems, you know, we might inherit some older systems that need to be maintained. It can, of course, be potentially more expensive, though, on the flip side of things, if you were to go into the building and completely gut it, scrape it clean, and build new inside. That can yield a higher expense. It can be more complicated to renovate and bring new systems, new plumbing systems underground through an existing slab, run ductwork through existing truss work. Sometimes you can't just scrape an existing building clean and put a new building inside because there's load-bearing walls. And we'll talk a little bit about that today because we've been back to Westridge since and actually climbed through it a little bit, walking through the attic to get a better sense of exactly how it was built. And if we do go through with a renovation project, one of the downsides could potentially be the optics. We've just spent a bunch of money and the facility looks generally the same. Where did we spend it? So we'd have to be cautious of that and make sure that it was clear that there was kind of new and old, that there was a kind of harmony between the new and old. I think more importantly, though, would be a question about how would we decide? And we go through this a lot with our clients over time. So we've just built this little small matrix that we can talk through with you in more detail. But just very quickly, you can see, you start a process and then you ask yourself these questions. Do you have to save the existing building? Yes, we do. Well, if it's a historic structure like the Congress Theater that we're working on downtown, a landmarked building, then you have to renovate and you have to inherit it. But if no, then you ask yourself, is it worth saving? Is it worth saving for any of the reasons that we've talked about previously? And if it's not worth saving, then you go to new construction. But if it is, does the program fit? And if the program fits, you determine if it's cost prohibitive. And if it's not cost prohibitive, then we get to the bottom line, and that's, does it make the project a better project? And then we can decide whether or not to renovate or build new. We've done a little digging with the help of Amalia Schwartz into the existing facility to see, is that existing Westridge something historic? And it's a portion of it is really quite old. The original schoolhouse to the north is from the 1920s, but the majority of it was added in the 50s and by architects Bertram Weber and Childs and Smith, both of whom are known, but neither of whom are regarded as being, incredibly significant architects in the Chicagoland area, though they do have some history in Highland Park. So those are things that we can dig into as well. Ultimately, though, the question is, how will we work with you? And I think we're starting to get to that as we talk through these decision matrices. And that starts, and especially with us, in a collaboration without preconception. So as demonstrated by NSSRA, a facility, a renovated project that that we just finished in Highland Park, our journey with them started almost a decade ago when they contemplated a building in Highland Park just behind Sunset Foods, and you'll recognize that octagon shape. They contemplated a building in the park, and I can remember being in meetings with former director McElroy thinking about this building with NSSRA. That didn't work out, and in 2017 we looked at a site in Glenview with the Park District where they could potentially build. That would be a new building. Then we looked at 2018 at the Northbrook Activity Center, a project that we bid on and didn't get, but that partnership with NSSRA fell through. But they had contemplated going into that facility with the Northbrook Activity Center. Ultimately landed on the facility that they're in currently that we renovated for them right on Lake Cook Road across from the Botanic Garden. As we've mentioned, we'll work with you to develop an engagement plan with the public. And really these questions that we'll ask are, when should we engage the public and how should we engage the public? Should we engage the public early, which is a great thought, but also comes with challenges, to understand their ideas and what their reservations are as a way of understanding, should we be renovating or building new? Ultimately, though, we'll just work with you to develop this entire matrices, this entire engagement plan. And this is an example of the engagement plan that we used with the Robert Crown Community Center that we just completed in Evanston. But the question isn't only when do we engage them early, or do we wait till we understand what our project will be before engaging them? It's also a question of how. Do we want to develop a list of stakeholders to understand what the programs really should be? Or are we only just presenting to the public to develop and develop consensus with them? I should also mention that with the Evanston Crown project, there was a stakeholder group called the Friends of Robert Crown. It was a private fundraising group that we worked with quite closely, who ended up raising privately 25% of the funds for the project. So if with Westridge, there might be other parts of the project, say like the fields, we could also think about how we would engage the public to achieve more program than we initially anticipated. I think we're also great listeners. We really truly believe that everyone has part of the answer. Obviously, the staff, obviously the commissioners, but also your constituents. And we can, when we engage those constituents, there's lots of different strategies for doing so. We want to be really good listeners to them. We don't want to just pay lip service. We really want to hear what they have to say and make this facility their facility. But once we understand that criteria, we'll design solutions that meet that criteria. So yes, we'll vet the program. We talked about in our first interview how we'll go through and do a deep dive into the program with you to really see where we can get programmatic overlap. But once we have those programmatic strategies developed, we'll design solutions that meet all the criteria that we've established to date. And if they are or happen to be, how do we renovate the facility, leaving programs, existing programs in place? We'll develop a phasing plan, as we did here with St. Chrysostom's in the Gold Coast, a project, an ongoing project, a multi-phased ongoing project that we're working on currently. Or, as we did with the Robert Crown, and as we've mentioned, we'll think about where on the site we can place the facility that either leaves the existing building in place so that programs can be maintained. Do we put it on the east side? I don't think putting it on the east side is actually the best place to put it, because I think the neighbors across the street are really used to looking across and at the park. And I think that seeing from Ridge Road, the programs, the parks, the play fields, perhaps the gymnastics, I think that could be more lovely. But could the building be on the west side of the park? I think that could be quite interesting to explore. And we did this at Robert Crown, where we moved the building around and we evaluated. We came up with a selection criteria. We looked at all the various options. We went through, we made these pros and cons lists for each of the options, and we ultimately landed on one of them based on that. Of course, one of those things we have to do is evaluate cost. We can get into this a little bit more detail, but we've looked at the potential costs that each of these projects could be, both as a new construction project and as a renovation project. And again, as always, there's pros and cons. So we can get into that in a little bit more detail if you're interested. We have the most ability to control the cost, and it's essential to control the cost early in the project. So making these decisions early is paramount, and we have the most amount of opportunity to do so early in the project as opposed to later, when we're making changes later in the project, the costs increase. So we really want to make all of these investigations and decisions now. Then we'll go back to the public and we'll engage them to develop consensus. And we've done this with you numerous times. We can do this in numerous ways. In the lower left is a good anecdote, a fun anecdote we tell about engaging during the Robert Crown process. There was a school across the street. And of course, you have a school in the facility. How can we engage the school in this process so that your whole community, young and old, big and small, are engaged by this process and are in love with it? We're very proud of our ability to communicate clearly. We'll communicate clearly, we'll communicate often. We'll draw lots of drawings, we'll build models, and those models and drawings need to be incredibly accurate so that when we engage the public with them and when we engage you with them, you see what you get, an image of Rosewood before and after, almost identical. And then we need to maintain that commitment all the way through. And again, this is where we think that we stand out. We are just there with you, and we will be there with you. I'll be there with you. Brian, Heather, there's a picture on the top right of Brian and I holding up the stakes to show everyone exactly how big the interpretive center would be on the beach. We'll be there through construction to make sure every last detail is in place. So again, I think we'll get into a little bit more specifics on Westridge if we want to talk, but we've done some quick little programmatic overlays of the existing building with the new program. And I know, again, we have to vet the program. We'll go through this programming exercise to really fine tune, but there are some challenges that the existing facility presents. Looking at, potentially how that could play out as a renovation project. We don't have it designed, but there's some initial thoughts, which is ultimately just to say that we know that change is challenging. Change for your community is challenging. Change is always causes a little bit of consternation among your constituents. We can help be the buffer between you and your constituents, and we can lead that process so that that change ends up meaning success. Success for the district, success for the park, success for the neighborhood. And the way that we think that we achieve that success is by letting the project reflect your mission. Really be demonstrative of your mission now and in the future. So I think with that, we'll turn it over to you and start with any questions.
President Ruttenberg?
Yes, no, thank you, Andy. We appreciated that. Let's start with Commissioner Freeman.
Hello, thank you
Hello.
for the presentation. So, what would the building look like, I guess, or what are your thoughts on that? I thought, we would see more of a plan or schematic. And what are your thoughts on where it really should be positioned on the property?
What would the building look like as a new construction or as a renovation project?
Well, as a new construction, because I think in the criteria we had new construction in there, if I'm
Sure.
not mistaken.
I got to share. So in our initial interview and in the initial projection, we thought the new construction building would go generally in the place of the current building. And we proposed that because we thought it was the most fiscally responsible thing to do. And we thought that it would be the most appropriate thing to do as a neighborhood response. It doesn't address the existing programs in Westridge particularly well. And if we needed to, we would want to think about a new location for the building, and we have some thoughts on that. So what we presented,
Actually, I like the idea of sort of moving it around, and you said, like, you know, we can pivot and sort of check out different spots. So rather than, I guess, press you to a specific plan, I was interested more in hearing, like, you know, maybe why you would move it around the property. You said you had some thoughts about that. So sorry if that was a bit of a static question, but kind of like, if you had to open the thought process and the world is your oyster, kind of what would you do, kind of thing.
Yep. So here's the existing site, and here's what we call like site influences. So here's a big open existing site. Here's a blank canvas. What do we have to do? We have to be mindful of having $15 million to work with, but we know that we can do a project for $15 million. We just have to, you know, use slider bars and determine where we're going to apply the resources. We have neighbors. We have neighbors who know that there's a building over here. We have neighbors who are very used to a view of the park. We have neighbors with a nice vegetated buffer to the park on the south. We have a lot of more institutional buildings on the west. So our initial proposal was to think about the building being in its existing location. But if we had to talk about a building being in a new location, I think the west side might be a more interesting location for the building than the east side, because a building on the east side would block the view from the neighbors, and not to mention would push the building further into the site and tighten the site. It would be very small up here, hardly any room for like a soccer field. Maybe you could fit the smaller baseball field in up here. But if the building were back here in this side, you would have much more room for fields on the east side of the park. What we were really looking for is the largest contiguous site. So that's when we were proposing the existing building to be here to the north. But if we were looking at a new location, the largest contiguous site would actually be here, where you could have ball fields and larger soccer fields. So we would want the site to be multi-use and multi-purpose, and that would be our thought. So we did look at, one of our thoughts is that you could look at putting the building here on the west. Now that changes access, but it might create some interesting synergies between some of the other existing facilities already on the site and the new park building.
There's additional advantages potentially for sharing parking lot resources, so that we could potentially have a smaller parking lot on this site, and for overflow parking in off-peak school times, we could utilize, perhaps a parking share solution. One other consideration was the idea about what would happen 20, 30 years from now. Would you ever potentially regain a more contiguous square shape and kind of gain that northwest corner? And how might the park over time have the potential to expand? And so not putting the building in a position where it would ultimately be in the way of any potential expansion that might happen in the future.
If you thought about that piece being acquired, which I have, the 112 piece there. Okay, so that
we were contemplating that both in the original proposal and in the potential where it might move to the western portion of the site.
Yeah,
again,
right.
Maintaining the largest contiguous portion of park. So we want to put the building in a position that no matter what would happen with the site over time, if that were a potential, and we don't really know if it is or isn't, but if it were to be a potential, it had the ability to do that. Even thinking about how the building might have the potential to expand as well over time. So thinking about, constructing the interior of the building in such a way that you could anticipate an addition going on it in one direction, should you have more land at some point in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you got me. Thank you. That was exactly what I was looking for. I have no additional questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, Terry?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate Andy, and your team. I think the best part I got out of your presentation was the sense that you've been here before, you'll be here through the process with us. And so I appreciate that. And I know I've seen you at various events and things like that. And your firm is, all over places that I've been. So I really appreciate that. And then Jen really hit at the heart of it. We're not designers, we're not architects ourselves. So seeing something and seeing your vision for where something would go was helpful. Have you done any kind of a traffic study or anything like that with the potential of putting the building on the west side? I know that when we put the nursery, when the nursery school found its home in that little corner on the northwest side there were some pushback about, because we have NSSED and Red Oak and Sherwood all back there along that corridor. Have you explored that? What can you tell me about that?
So we have not explored that yet, but we know that that would be a significant consideration, that you're going to change dramatically the traffic flow to the building. So let me go just back to that site plan. The site plan is not quite big enough to get all the way up to the north, but we would need to look at this. We've looked at this before with numerous projects. We've looked at this most recently in Gilson with the beach house restoration in Gilson. We've looked at this in Evanston with the Robert Crown Center. Traffic studies are really essential for the neighbors, for being good neighbors, which of course the Park District wants to and needs to be. So the question we would ask ourselves is, are we going to be, if the new facility were to be on the west side of the site, would access be gained coming around and across, or would we be using an existing driveway, which we could do because we have this existing easement to maintain to get to the site? That would maintain a similar traffic flow to the one we have. And it's just something that we would have to look at and think about.
One thing that the advantage of having a traffic study and something we did at the Robert Crown Center is it allows us the opportunity to then discuss with the city the idea of right sizing the parking. The zoning codes are pretty broad brush, and you've got a complex building with multiple types of use of various scales that have different criteria within the zoning code, but it also has different scheduling criteria as well. So some things overlap and some things don't. And so there's opportunities for shared spaces and a reduction potentially in parking spacing. And so again, it's the type of information that allows us to get to the kind of optimal design. So we're not over designing the parking. We're making sure that it's appropriate for it. And in the same vein, we're making sure that the traffic study thinks about how the circulation, not just to and from the building, but what its impact in the neighborhood might be, where somebody might be trying to, cut around, take a shortcut through the neighborhood or something like that. We want to have those considerations and how we would be careful of the ultimate traffic flow. This ultimately becomes a primary neighbor concern, something you hear all the time when you're talking about a large parkland site, about how it's going to affect parking and traffic, especially in those kind of big event, kind of when all the ball fields are active and there's a gymnastics meet happening, and it's really at its most active moment. That's when there's the largest concern. And the traffic study is something that allows all of us the necessary information to be able to kind of go back to the public and really explain that to them.
Okay, thanks. I just have one other question, and it's building on something you had mentioned, that we have multiple programs going on at the same time. And I was just wondering if you've given any thought to having the early childhood program there in terms of, separating it all, or having some security issues, mixing public with early childhood programs. Have you given any thought to how you might handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just going to use the initial presentation to demonstrate. So the early childhood program that's there, we understand that it's not DCFS certified, state certified preschool. I do think it would be interesting to talk to you about designing it in such a way that perhaps it could be in the future, so that you could have that flexibility in the future. And as such, we should be thinking about security so that they can be safe. But yes, they should be privatized in some way, which is to say down the end of a hallway, for example. So in either a renovation scenario or in a new, you would not want to walk through the early childhood to get to something else. You can't landlock a program behind early childhood anything. So early childhood either has to just be like its own arm out to the side or the end of an arm. Also, first of all, we think the combination of programs really makes this building. Like we call that area in the middle the social heart. That was one of the drawings that we drew initially that we're so excited about if it were a new facility. How do you get that mixer space where people are moving through and you can walk through and see gymnastics and have the boardroom right there and have early childhood with pottery on display in the distance? That social heart, that mixing center is that social condenser that is so exciting about a building such as this. But you have to be mindful in that programming that there's a staff space here, and that you want to have the Park District staff not intermixed through the early childhood as they are currently. You want them to have their own space so they can function, but then you want everyone to have their own beautiful access of this beautiful park. You don't want for any one of them to just kind of be forgotten and off on the side. So that's a long answer to your question, but yes, absolutely, we should be really sensitive to how to design it. We've designed these preschools before, even though it's not a certified preschool. We'd love to talk to you about potentially designing it in a way that it could be in the future, which means that things like safety really need to be considered with the program and with the design.
Thank you very much.
Terry, I'm sorry, you're done asking questions?
I am.
Okay, thank you. All right. Calvin?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I apologize. I lost a little bit of Terry's Q&A. My internet went out. Just as just an aside, the power just went out across the street from me, and my internet they're saying it's unstable. So Brian Romes, can you please circulate to all the commissioners the call-in number in case the internet goes down at anyone's house? I guess it's getting really bad out there. So
yeah, Don Matthews just texted me his internet and power just went out at his house.
Yeah.
I just sent it, so yes.
Okay, and I'm sure Dan Johnson is on it. We have one of the best IT guys in the business, so I'm sure he can handle anything. So, okay, Andy, thank you very much. Nice seeing you again. Hopefully, I can get through my Q&A without losing internet or power. So, can you talk about? Well, it sounds like what your preferred concept is to keep the building in the existing building envelope, the existing footprint, or close to the existing footprint. So, so you don't anticipate, or do you anticipate any issues with the neighbors, the single-family neighbors in the area?
Yeah. So, just first of all, it's not so much that it's our preferred concept. It's that when we were initially asked to think about a new building, we thought this was the most appropriate place to place a building for a variety of reasons that I'll talk through and answer your question here. But it's not necessarily our preferred concept. It was just our initial concept. It obviously is not sensitive to the maintaining the existing program in the current facility. We would need to solve that, and we don't have a solution for that. So that's where the conversation about moving the building elsewhere on the site would go. The reason why we thought the building, if it were new, could go here is actually in part because of the neighbors. So I'll go back to our influences slide. There already is a building here. It's a small, humble building, but it's a 40,000 square foot building. And we think we could design a new building in a similar way, low, appropriately scaled, and in a location where all of the neighbors already have come to expect it. We think we can design a better park building there in a few ways. But the reason why we initially positioned it here is because your south neighbors and your east neighbors are used to a building being here, and they would keep the building there. Your northern neighbors also are used to a building being here. And in our proposal, we thought what we would do is design a better park building and actually return some parkland here to the north to those neighbors, thereby opening up more of a view to the park for them after the building was done. So we walked through these steps to talk about all these influences, and this kind of new low building in the similar location has the benefit from a cost standpoint of utilizing a lot of the existing infrastructure, which we think would be sensitive and wise, placing this building in a location where the neighbors have already come to expect it, but then giving a little bit more parkland and buffer to those northern neighbors to improve the situation that they already have.
Got it. Okay, Andy, I really liked the architecture of the Crown Center in Evanston. I think it's a very attractive building. How do you balance the competing goals of creating some attractive, architecturally interesting building versus community members who think that you're spending too much money on architecture and that we're being frivolous with taxpayer money?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. The way that you do it is you design a building that's perfect for the site and that's utterly demonstrative of your mission. So how do we design a building that's perfect for the site? We make it a better parkland building. The existing building is fine, and there is some charm there, but it's utterly opaque. You really can't get to it. You can't get from it to the site particularly well. There's no significance of arrival, hence the kind of ins and outs of this building. So in this kind of proposal, this would be like a drop-off where you could see a more appropriate drop-off with a low building, a long overhang or porch where there's outdoor space, where the interior program flows to the outside. This could potentially be done with both a new project or a renovation project, but those kind of thickened edges, those porch spaces are how you would design a building that's a more appropriate park building, the interior exterior connections, that isn't a so-called like excessive waste of taxpayer dollars because of the additional benefit and program, an outdoor space where ball players in the event of a windstorm or a lightning storm could run underneath cover. I could talk for hours answering this question, Cal, so I'll stop there and maybe you could make sure that I'm on the right path.
Yeah, no, you're on the right track. I mean,
I think the only other thing I would add to it, oh, sorry, Carl.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
The only other thing I would add to it is that it's ultimately a communication question. You know, we're going to be communicating to you and to the neighborhood and to the general public the value of the new building and what it's bringing to your constituency, but also where it falls in line from a budgeting and scheduling standpoint. We'll be able to put it in context in terms of other peer buildings across the area, other buildings that we've worked on, so that you understand what its cost per square foot is, things of that nature, so that you can understand that, that getting good architecture isn't coming with an extra price tag associated with it. And we'll be able to communicate that throughout from the very beginning and update it along the way.
And what are your thoughts regarding the site? It's as you mentioned earlier, there is a more I guess institutional uses to the west, and then on three sides you have I guess moderately priced single family homes. What is your vision for how you integrate this commercial building along Ridge Road when it's basically on a peninsula surrounded by single family homes?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So again, that's why I think either this site here or the west site is the more appropriate location. So the neighbors appreciate the park, not a building or not a parking lot. So keep it low and keep it open. I really don't think a building to the east along Ridge Road is the more appropriate thing, because what it does is it makes the parkland the back of the building. We would never design a parkland building with its back facing the park. We would always want it to design itself to the park so that the two things are integrated. I mean, that's what our architecture is known for, is integrating buildings in parklands. Now, should it be to the north or to the west? We'll look at that and we'll think about it. To the west, obviously, it sites itself with a bunch of other larger scale buildings. So there's a lot of potential synergy there. But when you do that, I think the other thing to consider is that parks are for everyone. And now this is something that you and the district really need to contemplate, but we really think that parks should have a diversity of use, which is why I'm on this slide. So I think it's really lovely that the park has a community garden. And I think it could maintain a community garden, and the community garden could grow. And that wants to be accessed by the neighbors on the east, which is why, again, I wouldn't put a building between the neighbors and the park. But it also has a really nice stand of trees on the west. And it's not like any of them are heritage. I didn't see any heritage trees in our investigation of the site. But the site isn't just one of sports recreation. It's also just one of potentially bird watching, and maybe there's a habitat or something. So if the building were to go to the west side, we would also want to make sure that we weren't, unless you were sure that the district was sure that it was really a recreation park, we would want for there to be this diversity of use: sports, bird watching, community gardening, etc. And that's why we think to the north or to the west would be more appropriate.
With regard to sustainability, what type of elements can you envision? Sustainable elements can you envision for this building?
So obviously, if we reuse the existing building, that's the highest form of sustainability, is reusing this existing resource. So that it would be sustainable in that way. If we were to build a new building, one of the thoughts that we proposed in our initial interview is that potentially we could reuse some of that brick. We can reuse some of that material. But and that could be cool. That could be a way of maintaining the story of Westridge through its new history, through its new story, is by having some elements of the old building. What are the new sustainable elements? Always, always, always. We think about it in terms of a pyramid, where the most sustainable elements aren't the highest tech. We'll get there. But the highest tech sustainability, that's the highest cost sustainability too. So the lowest tech sustainability is appropriate siting of the building so that the sun can heat the building appropriately through overhangs so that the sun doesn't overheat the building in the summer. Passive systems, we call them. Natural ventilation, windows and doors that can open so that the building can naturally ventilate itself. That's like the lowest level of sustainability, but also the most valuable sustainability. We would make sure that this building was incredibly well naturally lit, another signature of our architecture. And one of the challenges that reusing the existing building might present is that we would make sure that every space had natural light, and that the building could basically be without artificial lights through the majority of the day until we got to December, of course. And that saves so much electricity, and it's just a simple planning gesture that we would just be really thoughtful about from the beginning. Climbing up that pyramid all the way to the top, let's line the building with photovoltaics if we can, and see how much of that we can offset. Let's use the lowest kind of carbon imprinted material as possible so that we can be as close to carbon neutral potentially. Let's talk about processes in the building so that we can think about offsetting that carbon usage in the future. And obviously then it's just a system conversation. So now you're just thinking about the highest tech systems that perform the best. We should also think about water usage. Again, I could go on and on, but we should be really good about the water on the site. We know that the water on the site needs to be better maintained, and we could have really great water gardens, natural elements of natural planting that make some of the play fields a little bit drier in a very simple way.
Ultimately, this is something that we're going to work with you at from the very beginning of the project. We run at the start of each project an integrated design process where we'll gather your core team together along with our team, including our full consultant team, and we'll go through each one of these potentials, thinking about what they might mean and what their impact would be and what the potential solutions are, so that we can set some goals, and then we'll track that throughout the project, and we'll see what's possible and what's not, and see where that can lead. But ultimately, at some point, we will set that in stone and say, this is what we're going to achieve from a sustainability standpoint. And we'll track that throughout the project with all of our consultants to make sure that we do that.
Do you ever integrate solar or wind power into your developments?
Solar for sure. Wind power is a little more challenging in a neighborhood setting, and so we haven't done that. But there's an awful lot of opportunity for solar right now. Community solar is pretty straightforward at this point. An institution or an owner can simply engage in a contractual relationship with an energy provider. So the solar panels are effectively free on the front end, and then you're just buying the electricity from that solar provider until you've paid off the value of the solar panels. So it's a great kind of no cost, upfront cost to getting solar power on the rooftop.
Okay, and getting back to Jen's question earlier, Commissioner Freeman's question regarding the two potential sites that you see on the property. I assume that if the building if it's a group decision to relocate the building to the west portion of the property, then that building would be oriented towards Red Oak School. You wouldn't set a building that far set back and orient it towards Ridge Road. Isn't that?
No. Yeah, no. It would be oriented to the Red Oak School. Yeah, but yes, it would be. It would not be set back into the park, again, leaving the largest contiguous area of parkland possible. But we would design it in such a way that it was like transparent through it. That one of the challenges of these buildings is, where is the back of the building? And we would just be really, really sensitive about where the back of the building was, so that it could be designed not only to the street, but also to the park. It's really paramount that a parkland building be designed to the park with its back not facing the park.
Okay, that's all I have. The power just went back out across the street, so it looks like maybe things are getting better around here. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Cal. Brian Kaplan.
I'm good. I am marking off my questions. It's the benefit of going last. Thank you, Andy. A very nice presentation.
Thank you, Brian.
I echo Brian's comment. It's a very nice presentation, and the questions I would have asked have been nicely answered, asked by others and nicely answered. And I just want to thank you, Andy and team, for making this presentation as clear and understandable as you did. And we're very excited with our two finalists, and got some tough decisions, but we thank you, Andy and team.
Yeah, of course, very happy to be here. Very thankful for the opportunity.
Okay.
So Brian Romes, Mr. Executive Director, I have to find that cheat sheet right now, right?
That's right. This does conclude the portion of this agenda item. So again, want to thank the Woodhouse Tanucci team as well as Gay Walt for attending this meeting. We're going to wrap up our final agenda items and conclude the meeting. So that concludes this portion, and President Ruttenberg, we will take it from there.
All right, thank you. Once again, thank you, Andy and team. We appreciated it.
Thank you.
All right.
Executive Director Romes, is there any other business?
There is no other business, and I will note that there are no attendees at the meeting regarding public comment.
Okay, so I don't have to read all that stuff. Okay. Is there a motion to go into closed session pursuant to the following section of the Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1, the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreation, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body?
Yes, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Kaplan,
Say yes.
Nod
Brian,
your head, Brian.
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Vice
Aye.
President Grossberg,
Yes.
Aye.
President Ruttenberg.
And I say aye. Also, why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we call in on a different number, correct?
That's correct. This, for those watching, if anyone's watching live, this meeting will stay open until we return, but we will now go into closed session. So you can use the other link.
All right, and we'll take a 5-minute, we'll start at 7 o'clock.
Okay, great.
All right, so we log off this one. Off.
Yes. Dan, are you staying here?
I keep this one up and running for you, sir.
Okay, I'm going to leave and then go to the other one. Thank you.
All right, see you shortly.
Okay, so are we all here?
Do not believe Commissioner Freeman is here.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
here.
Cal is here, Brian Kaplan is here, Terry is here. Okay. So the special meeting has reconvened into open session at 7:25. And consistent with what we were just talking about is Terry's question about are we committed to, wait, did we lose Brian? No. Are we committed to
Okay, I'm
process.
back. What did I miss?
Nothing. We reconvened.
Okay.
I had to do it twice myself. So the question that Terry raised is, are we definite that Westridge should be removed and replaced by a new building? And so perhaps, Terry, we should ask the staff to start with that.
I think that's a bigger discussion. I don't think we're going to make that decision tonight. I think that that's something we have to engage our architects and whoever we decide to make that discussion, to have that discussion. I don't know if we have enough information to even begin to have that conversation.
Then why are we engaging an architect to design a new building? I thought the decision was made that Westridge has so many problems, like no water, no hot water, no plumbing that really works, that there's maybe asbestos. I don't remember if that's still the case, that it was beyond a question that we were going to replace it.
Right. I guess my question is that have we ever decided, yes, we are replacing Westridge. Yes, staff is going to be placed at Westridge. Yes. You know what I'm saying? Like,
We've never had that conversation.
yeah, it seems like we just rocketed past all that to architects, which, I'm happy with it. It's going to be super cool and everything like that. But I don't necessarily want to do this, but could we can potentially take staff and put them in one of our other buildings? I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying we've never had this discussion and then make a much smaller footprint at Westridge when we rebuild it. That's just for programming and for early, childhood. So those kind of conversations should inform us as to what this building would look like should we build it. But I don't feel like we've had it. That's all I'm
I
saying.
think it's a pricing discussion though, because where would the programming go while we're building?
Well, Terry, with all due respect, we spent 2 years talking about it. And we spent 2 years talking about it within the Green Print plan, the Green Print 2014, before you were on the board. And based on the Lakota Group study of the building, it was determined at that point that it was not economically feasible or prudent to renovate the existing structure. The change occurred is when I think it was White, the architectural firm, came before us a couple weeks ago, or before staff a couple weeks ago, and they indicated that they believed that there was a possibility of preserving the existing structure. So the question that we asked, is there some new information that White developed that would change 2 years worth of discussions and deliberations by staff and the Green Print Committee and the board when we considered Green Print 7 years ago? Has there been a change in circumstance that would allow us to preserve the building? And I think what we heard from the architects tonight was, no, they don't believe there's anything different. There's just one set of architects, was the White group, that thought there was a possibility, and it was determined by this board that they were not a finalist, and so I guess that concept went away. But if you want to revisit that conversation, because that probably predates you being on the board, that's fine. We have all that material that we can provide.
Okay, yeah, because we have 2 new board members since then, and I feel like I have not been a participant in it, and being sensitive to you, Cal, the way you kind of felt about Park Avenue, like you felt like we had kind of gone from A to C and then you missed sort of B. I don't want to feel the same way about this that you feel about that. So
So my suggestion is, why don't you take a look at Greenprint 2014? Because Brian Rhodes, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there's a whole lot of a comprehensive discussion in Greenprint with regard to the specific issue. And you could look at any of the backup materials that was prepared with connection with Greenprint. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian. It's been a while since I looked at it.
No, I'd be happy to, we can either have a separate discussion, or Terry, I'd be happy to sit down with you and share some of the materials, not just from the Greenprint original 2015 report, but then the refresh, which was in 2019 that it was actually done, and then it was approved by the board in 2020. And then, of course, we hit the pandemic. And then when we came to 2021, I know we did represent a summary of that information, and then kind of talked about the next steps. And step one was really to look at possible site locations and possible partnerships. And that's why we spent the majority of 2021 working with School District 112. We spoke with the City of Highland Park. We spoke with School District 113. And we looked for other partner organizations and different sites to consider throughout the entire year this year. And so what it really led us to was this fall discussing, let's get an architect, because as you saw and heard tonight, the architect in the first phase can really help validate what was discussed and decided in the Greenprint and the Greenprint update and over the past year. And we can sort of revalidate what we previously validated, since things do change as we go forward. So I think that's a critical part. And again, I'm going to say, I think both firms did a really good job of saying, especially Halliburton Root, in just saying that one of the essential first steps is, yes, we want to look back at Greenprint and the update, but we also want to revalidate that data and that information and those thoughts and opinions of the community and the board still ring true.
So here's my suggestion. Brian, why don't you put together the information so Terry can educate himself?
But not
with
just
regard to
me.
this? What?
Right? I would imagine that Jen would want to have that information, or maybe not. And Brian Kaplan, you sort of did confirm that maybe you feel the same way I did, even though you've been on the board, that maybe you don't feel like you've heard it all either. So I just want, if it's just me, then I'm an aberration.
Well, we haven't discussed it for a long time, and I think a short discussion wouldn't hurt. And I'd like to see those materials too, to refresh my memory.
Okay. So my suggestion is have Brian Rhodes, why don't you provide that information, circulate it. If do a short staff memorandum summarizing it, and so that the people who don't feel like if they've received that information yet, so they can talk intelligently about what the possible future of the existing structure, then we can have that conversation. I'll talk about anything at any time, but I want to make sure that information is circulated before we talk about it.
And to clarify, do we feel that that is something crucial to choosing an architect? Because I feel like between the two of these, we haven't had a ton of discussion, but I thought that the process of choosing the group was to find someone that you can work with and you feel comfortable and that sort of thing. So the two are kind of mutually exclusive for me. I would expect the one we hire to do that. So can we make the decision on the architect and then discuss the other piece, or?
Jen, can I jump in?
Yeah.
One of the reasons that we are going down this road is several engineering reports pointing out the deficiencies and problems with Westridge. And that's separate from what the architect is going to tell us about programming and our needs.
Right.
And those are the reports that obviously Brian should accumulate so that you and whoever wants to be re-educated or educated as to why Westridge has run its course, leading us to the point of we're going to design a new building and provide for some different programming, et cetera, at this new building.
Right. Can I just isolate the one point? And Jen, I agree with you. I think that there's going to be a new building going up there. And I think Halliburton is the group to do it. Now, it's just a matter of what is in that building. And I guess I keep isolating this staff thing. And I want the staff to have all the best and everything like that. I don't remember ever being a part of a conversation where we said, yes, the staff has to be at Westridge. That's just one part of it. I'm sure it would be very handy and maybe it's cost effective and everything like that, but I don't know that. I've just never been a part of that conversation. So that if I could just isolate one part of it.
And just, I just want to provide some perspective that I think once we work with an architectural firm, I think that's a critical component of one of the first steps, again, is to really look at that and to say, again, revalidate what we've already gone through with Greenprint and the Greenprint update and what we've explored. It's to take a look at that and say, okay, we've done a lot of great work, spent a lot of time to get to where we are today. But let's make sure that we, again, revalidate this. So as we go forward, there is confidence from each board member. And I'll also say, as with any other engineering or design contract, there's always a point where we can stop and we can recalibrate and we can pivot. You only pay for the work that actually gets done. So it's not like we're committing to a long-term marriage. Obviously, that's the intention, but there is a point where we can always shift. But in the meantime, I think we can do this in tandem. We can begin negotiations. We can share information with the board. We can have those conversations and hopefully, per the board's approval, get to the next step.
Okay, I feel comfortable with that.
Okay. Is there anything else that anybody wants on this project? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
So we're adjourning till tomorrow night, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Unless you want to stay on.
Can we just do tomorrow night now?
We do what?
No, I got Il Fornos to eat.
Wait. What did Brian say? I'm sorry.
He said aye.
Okay, all in favor? All in favor? Aye. The motion.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Motion's carried at 7:37. Thank you.